There have really been two ways that the majority of programs put their rosters together in 2024. Essentially, you either recruit out of high schools, you get as many high school seniors into your roster as you can, or you recruit out of the transfer portal and you leave essentially high school recruiting behind. Those are the two options. But there is a third emerging that I find really fascinating because it's not necessarily against the rules. It's playing by the letter of the law. Whether it's playing by the spirit of the law is a different discussion. So Nebraska is one of those programs that is operating in this new kind of third tier of, I'm going to get as many scholarship players as I can get. And I realize that the limit is 85. Nebraska doesn't care. Nebraska doesn't care how many scholarship limits are in place. When the NCAA says you can have 85 scholarship players, Nebraska is not deterred in the slightest. What they are doing, and I find both sides of the discussion interesting because on one hand, you found a loophole and you are using it to your advantage, flat out exploiting it, to tell you the truth. And on the other side, you can argue that that's not the spirit of the rule and it's not fair. I don't think that's true. I think it's fair. It's not against the rules. Nebraska has 98 scholarship players on their roster right now. 98. When you can only have 85. And they've made no bones about it. We're not going to get to 85. What they're doing is at the end of, when push comes to shove, when they have to be down to 85, they just tell the 13 kids that are on scholarship, we're going to give you NIL money to pay for your tuition. We're going to pay for your room and board. We're going to pay for your dining plan. We're going to pay for your full cost of tuition through our NIL. So when everybody else is operating with 85 scholarship players, in Nebraska's eyes, they're going to have 95. They want to have 95 scholarship players. And if they've got the NIL capabilities to do that, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? In a sport that is now going to require the champion to play 16, 17 games, depth matters. Having as many able-bodied, high-quality athletes as you can get matters. Now, I'm not saying Nebraska's going to win a national title because they got 10 more scholarship players than everybody else. But when you look at the rules, it's not against them. It's not against the rules to say, hey, we would have you on scholarship if we had them available, but we don't. So now we're going to get you NIL money to pay for your scholarship. Truthfully, it's a pretty brilliant plan. Like, you found a loophole in the rule book, and Matt Rule has made really no bones about it. Like, hey, this is what we're doing. And you're frankly kind of a step ahead of everybody else because it would be really simple. At a lot of these universities, and it's one of the driving points. Greg Byrne is the athletic director at Alabama, and he'd given an interview at some point that basically said, college sports, unfairly in his eyes, gets a bad rap because, for instance, Alabama's baseball team gets 11.7 scholarships to split up between the 35 guys that it wants on its roster. And he's like, Alabama's not the reason that there's only 11.7 scholarships. It's the schools in the Horizon and the MAC with 2 A's and the MEAC and the Big West, the Great Western Conference, and all the Big West, not Great West, Big West Conference. It's small athletic programs like that He's like, Alabama could afford, everybody in the SEC, everybody in the Big Ten, everybody in the ACC could afford, if they wanted to have 20 basketball scholarships, to have 30 baseball scholarships, to have 30 softball scholarships, to have a full-fledged, everybody on the gymnastics team has a full scholarship. We have that capability, but we're in the minority that everybody else, the small Division I programs, don't have the ability to have 30 baseball scholarships. It's why non-scholarship FCS football exists. If Dayton and Butler and Valparaiso and Davidson and San Diego and Jacksonville had to give out 65, 67 football scholarships instead of 0, they wouldn't have football anymore. And so it's a similar thing in FBS football. Bowling Green and Coastal Carolina and Old Dominion and Liberty and Wyoming probably can't afford to have 105 scholarship players. But the Big Ten could. The SEC could afford to, if they wanted to say, we're going to have 105 scholarship players. You could do that. You could afford that. And Nebraska's literally saying, like, I think it's ridiculous somewhat to count like the tuition for players against the budget. Sidetrack the budget of like a university athletic program, because like it's kind of does it technically, are you technically charging yourself tuition? Yeah, but like you and I both know that like tuition doesn't cost it's not as much as it costs more than it should, right? Like a college is making money on that. So can we just stop pretending? Nonetheless, Nebraska could have 105 scholarship football players if they wanted to. Truthfully, Nebraska probably have 150 scholarship football players if they wanted to. But the limit's 85, which is, it feels like a good number. It's been the right number for a long time. I don't know that it deserves to be messed with. But they're just coming in and saying like, hey, however many scholarship level quality players we can get, we're just going to go ahead and do that. And if it costs us money out of pocket in our NIL to do so, oh, well, we've got 98 scholarship football players. We are playing at a gigantic advantage to other schools. It makes sense. It's a really, truly, part of me is like, yeah, does that go against the spirit of the scholarship rules and NIL in the way that it's all set up? Yeah, undeniably. But at the same time, they didn't say you couldn't. Nobody said, hey, you're not allowed to do that. Like they might in the future, but then the argument becomes like, wait a second, you're going to take 13 scholarships away from kids who are going to get to go to college for free? Do you have any idea in the year of our Lord 2024 how ridiculous you look if you're like, no, 15 kids don't get to go to college for free. They get crippling student loan debt. Like it's a bad look to be the grim reaper of free college. So Nebraska's got this like great stand. Like they are on a pedestal looking down at everybody. Like, what are you going to do? You know what you're going to do? You're going to do exactly what we're doing. So don't be surprised when Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Wake Forest and Boston College and Oklahoma State go, well, hold on a second. We can get free college for our kids too. No more walk-ons. No more preferred walk-ons. No more gray shirts. No more. We'll get you next year, big fella. To hell with it. If you want to come here and throw your body on the line in practice, guess what? You're going to college for free. And who's going to say no to that? Who's going to say, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore? Nobody. So Nebraska's game in the system, and how long it takes everybody else to realize that they're game in the system, I don't know. But as it sits right now, they got an upper leg on everybody else. And you know what? Kudos to them. Because it's thinking outside the box. And when you are in a spot like Nebraska, you kind of got to do outside the box thinking. And I think at some point we'll look at Matt Rule as somewhat of a visionary rather than well, wait a second, is he skirting the damn rules right now? I don't think you're going to think that. I think you're going to see everybody else be like, well, I saw what Nebraska was doing and then went to my collective and said, I need tuition money for about 15 more kids. Who's going to say no to that? That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.